you're the rabbi, you got to come up with something good to say. Goes to sleep, wakes up, he goes to the funeral, gets up there, takes a deep breath. He's like, Joe, he wasn't as bad as his brother Tom. So when I think about panels, I always say when there's a lot of panels, we're not as bad as the other panel. But what I would say is this, maybe that wasn't as funnier in my head. I'll own that. But we're really excited to have this panel, and I have an incredibly talented, thoughtful, and just overall superstar panel of these three incredible women. And really excited to dive into a little bit about BDS. And I don't think anybody's ever said I'm excited to dive into BDS. But I want to take just a moment to sort of offer BDS, and before I go into this, there are questions, there are note cards that some of you might have taken on your way in, and Dovie's standing back there. If you want a note card to ask a question, which we will have time at the end, just raise your hand, and he'll come around with pens and note cards if you need it. So, and maybe Dovie wants to come up here so he can see everybody, but if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and we'll get you a note card and we'll do it at the end. So, BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions. Right? In many ways, it's a movement that affects social individuals. It affects the economics of someone, and it affects ultimately the livelihood of companies and universities, and really the idea of targeting companies and universities historically to divest from Israel or interests that have anything to do with Israel. What we have seen in the post-October 7th world is that the same tactics and the same strategies and the same tactics are being used, but they're not just targeting institutions. They're actually targeting individuals. And it is a change in what we've seen. Some of you may have seen, we've seen lists of Jewish therapists or Zionist therapists that have appeared online, or medical professionals. We've seen lists of Zionist and Jewish authors to be boycotted. We have seen Jewish professors don't take their classes. These, pardon my French, the University of Chicago had a whole thing about shitty Zionist classes. Don't take those, right? And so what we wanted to dive into is not just look at BDS, but actually look at how it's morphed a little bit, and how the targets have changed a little bit, and how we at ADL also are trying to address this and support victims of BDS that I think in many ways you might consider to be sort of non-traditional BDS victims. And so I want to introduce our panelists here, and I'm going to go from, shall we say, I guess my far left to the right, and I want to make sure I get all of their titles correctly, which is why I'm looking at all of this. But on our far left, we have Sarah Livingston, who is the Director of Member Engagement for the Academic Engagement Network.
Oh.
Next to her, I gotta say
That's
that.
an excellent answer.
Okay, camera done, all right? Our next is Susan George. Susan is the Executive Director of the Progressive Zionists of California.
Yay.
And lastly, there we go. And lastly, we have Bianca Jade, who's an entrepreneur and a TV and internet personality. I would encourage each of you on your app, you can get more in depth on their bios, but I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna jump right into some of our questions here. Right? So I want to start with all three of you, and perhaps maybe Susan, you can go first, and then we'll kind of work through, and then Bianca, and then Sarah. Each of you has a personal and unique story as it relates to BDS. And at the same time, I think, as we were preparing for this, they felt eerily similar. And so I thought it'd be a good place to start this panel, perhaps, by asking each of you to take a couple minutes to kind of tell your story. Like, what's your deal?
Thank you, everyone, for being here. For a couple of things. I've just gotten over a cold, but there's a little bit of residue, so if I cough, please excuse me. And the other thing is, PZC, Progressive Zionists of California, our work is primarily in the California Democratic Party. So I'll be speaking about my experience there, but I'm not here in terms of, I think it's very important to address anti-Semitism in our own house. And oftentimes we don't do that. We point at the other party and say, look at what's happening over there. And that is really how PZC came about, is we saw a rising rising tide within our own party in 2017, and we knew we needed to address it. And this is a personal story, and it's the story of PZC because I'm one of the founders. On the heels of the 2016 Democratic Convention, I was there at the convention. I was a delegate to the National Convention. I ran to be a delegate in the state party. And very excited to get to work on lots of important issues. We attend, when I say we, in that case, I was with my partner, Matthew Finkelstein, here, who's a fearless leader, and we were at the meeting.
Progressive Caucus.
Progressive Caucus and Arab American Caucus meeting. And over a third of the meeting was all about Israel is an apartheid genocide state, we must boycott it. There were handouts on the chairs, JVP brochures, and it was quite shocking. We'd never seen it in that kind of directed fashion before. So the meeting went on, there was a JVP slideshow. Jewish Voice for Peace is a extremist anti-Zionist organization. And so they had their slideshow. Then all of a sudden we're voting on a motion. And this motion was to not oppose any boycott of Israel in the party. And there were about 400 people in the room.
Largest caucus.
And yeah, it's the largest caucus in the state party.
History.
Shh.
Sorry.
So it was put forward, and you could see this was probably already a done deal. You had 30 seconds to oppose it, so I did. I came up in front of the room and I said, this does not represent our small d democratic values. This is about non-engagement or anti-normalization. This is about us not talking to each other. This is pitting us against each other. And the motion passed, completely performative. Nothing happened with that motion. It was completely performative. But what's interesting is what happened after the meeting. I walked outside with my partner, and we were flooded with people thanking us, thanking me for opposing the motion. They said they were in shock, they were afraid to vote, they felt bullied, and that is when the idea of beginning Progressive Zionists of California came about, is right from that experience. And since then, we've brought together friends, allies, partners, and we really made it our mission because it's not the fight that we want to have, but we're not going to stand by and do nothing. So we made it our mission to not only do the work that we feel is important on a larger scale, but to address any form of anti-Semitism that comes up. And we've been very successful, but there have been some real challenges, and maybe I can speak to more of that later.
Great, thanks so much. Bianca, could you share?
So in addition to being an entrepreneur, I'm a women's lifestyle and beauty influencer and TV host. And I really never shared much about being Jewish on my social media platforms, aside from celebrating Hanukkah or the holidays. And I definitely always participated in the Matzah Challenge every year with the UJA. But I really didn't talk about religion much. I did always call myself a Jewtina because I'm a Honduran Jew, which is kind of rare. And so people always thought that was cute when I would introduce myself as a Jewtina. But then after October 7th, that wasn't cute anymore. And I was noticing suddenly that out of nowhere I had a bunch of viewers on my social media channels that were not my normal viewers. They were BDS trolls, is what I call them. And they were watching all my stories, which were not about religion. They were commenting on all my posts, which were not even about the war, nothing. They just decided they wanted to, infiltrate my social media pages. And this was something that I had never experienced before, and I didn't really know how to handle. I don't like censorship, so I didn't want to delete people's comments. I've always allowed people to openly share whatever they wanted on my but it got really bad. So bad that, as an influencer, a lot of influencers do brand partnerships with companies. It's how, we monetize our platforms, and they were specifically going to these posts, these brand partnerships I had, with companies, skincare companies, things like lotion or jewelry or whatever, and they were going and saying things about me, like saying that I was a Jew pig or that I was a baby killer, like all these horrible things, which spiraled into the brands contacting me, super concerned about these comments that were on the post. I immediately went into shock because I had never in my life, dealt with anything like this. I had learned so much about people that had in school, but I had never experienced being targeted like this. I say, like, if I had been doing something bad, like if I had been, doing something hurtful or harmful, I may have understood it, but I remember I posted a video that went viral of myself taping the kidnapped hostage posters all over the Bedford stop in Williamsburg. I live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and this was like the beginning. Like that was all I had to do to become a major target of this BDS action.
Thank you so much. Sarah?
How do I follow that? So I have spent, is this louder than everyone else, or is that just my voice? I'm so sorry. I'm like a live action cartoon character up here. I spent the past 12 years working in the Jewish professional world, which is an interesting space to be, right? You're surrounded by an echo chamber, but you're constantly confronted with the pain and trauma of the anti-Semitism and all the things that come with it. I'm a former Hillel director, executive director at Ohio University. I'm a former faculty member in Jewish studies, and I left the Hillel world and I told myself that I was going to fight anti-Semitism full-time. It was my only goal. I had no idea where I was going to end up, but I knew that I needed to fight anti-Semitism full-time. And my current position is as the Director of Member Engagement for the Academic Engagement Network, which is an incredible nonprofit organization, not a Jewish organization, that fights anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on college campuses through the vehicle of defending academic freedom. And we support 1,200-ish faculty members across 325-ish campuses across the US. And that's my job. I manage that network. I connect those faculty with each other and help them meet their goals. But as a faculty member and as a Hillel director, I was fighting anti-Semitism sort of on the front lines. So I come to my current position from a space of support because I've been there. And what made me leave the other side was 3 separate anti-Semitic incidences on campus. And the one that really got to me was a student of mine who was in the School of Education. She had to miss class because it was Yom Kippur, and the professor had scheduled a museum visit for the class session on Yom Kippur. We can talk about systemic bias later. But she was then given an assignment to make up for missing class. After 3 weeks of asking her professor what she needed to do to make up the class, he gave her a 5-page paper assignment with very intensive questions to answer after she took her own time going to the museum. No one else in this class received this assignment. They went to the museum as a class and they left. There wasn't even a group discussion. So we went to the university and, as a good, political position, you try and have a conversation sort of off the books. You go and you talk to the dean and face to face and you say, can you speak with your faculty member? She does, and he doubles down, triples down. I get to decide how I assign makeup assignments. And it ended up having to go through legal at the university because it was inappropriate and retaliatory, and it was based on her being Jewish. And that's just how it is. And I realized that I could only do so much in my position as a faculty member and as a Hillel director, and that I needed to do more. And now that I've come into this role, what I see every day is a constant attacking of academic freedom by rejecting the voices of pro-Zionist and pro-Jewish faculty. And it's interesting because it's very much the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And we want to fight the good fight with the scholarship and the data and the evidence, because that's what academics do. But you can't always do that. So we work very hard to create environments that are different. We have organizations like our organization, Faculty Against the Anti-Semitism Movement, that supports faculty through affinity groups on campus, and it's changed things, I think, for the better, but every day there's something new. So GW, that's a great one. I feel like I could list out all the things that we're dealing with right now.
Well, let me build on that. And can you talk, I share this, I think, with the three of you. I went to school at Michigan State. I graduated from Michigan State in 2000, so now you know how old I am. But I remember when I was a junior or senior in college, and it was 1998, right? It's the 50th anniversary of the National commemoration. And being at Michigan State, there's a large Arab American community, and I remember it was sort of like for me was my introduction to sort of BDS, right? And I didn't actually know what it was. I had no idea how to respond. I was Hillel president at the time and had no, and now I think about the tactics that were used back then. And I'd love for you, Sarah in particular, to dive in a little bit. How have those tactics changed in today's world, and how they're targeting Jewish, you said pro-Zionist or Zionist or pro-Jewish academics, and even how those tactics, and if and how they've changed post October 7th.
I think with the university environment, one of the sort of best examples of how it's changed is talking not actually about a specific campus, but the AAUP is the American Association of University Professors. It's a union. It's a union. What's a union's job? Protect the union members, but fight for their rights as employees to have safe working environments, strong contracts, good pay, etc. The union, after 10/7, and the president, the national president of the union, happens to be an anti-Zionist Jew, and he decided that now was the time, and we have, of our 1,200 members, I couldn't tell you the number, but many of them are currently still or were AAUP members, and the ones that were AAUP members often left, many of them left because of the anti-Semitism.
God bless you.
So the union votes to remove their boycott clause as an organization. So that's a removal of institutional neutrality. And that says, if you want to boycott as a chapter, you can. We don't think that's against the rules anymore. And then, of course, the national president of AAUP is a faculty, not that any of you, some of you know this, but the national president of AAUP is a professor, faculty member at Rutgers. So then he goes to his campus and says, now that AAUP nationally thinks it's okay for us to boycott, we should have a BDS resolution for our union chapter. It's not the sweeping win he thought it was. They had very limited numbers voting. It was, anyone that's ever studied statistics knows how manipulative, how easy it is to manipulate statistics. So it looks good if you want it to look good, it looks bad if you want it to look bad. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they passed the resolution, we knew it was gonna happen. But what does that do? What does that do, Susan? As my friend and colleague sitting next to me said, it's performative. They send an email to their members going, we won! Now we need to forget that we were on opposite sides of this issue and fight for the rights of our professors to have strong contracts. No, that's not how this works. And you know how it doesn't work is that the evidence, Dr. Eyal Feinberg is a researcher, director of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Gratz College. He works with the ADL, is an AEN member. His research has proven time and again that the passing of BDS resolutions on campus, both at the student level and the faculty level, increase anti-Semitism across the board for staff, students, and faculty. You pass a resolution, anti-Semitism goes up. That's what happens on campus. The data's there, it's evidence-based. I'm not just saying whatever I want, which I do sometimes. But the evidence is there. So what does this mean? This means that it was very performative on AAUP's part. We want to say that we stand with Palestine. And the issue then becomes what happens on campus. And this is the silent boycott. This is professors taking it upon themselves, even though it goes against the university policy, to refuse to interview or engage with Israeli postdoctoral fellows who are applying for programs at the university, or Jewish professionals. This is a Jewish faculty member who teaches courses at a law school with 100 to 300 students in them, has phenomenal student reviews, and on her personal social media page, she talks about wanting the hostages to come home. That's all she talked about, wanting the hostages to come home. And after 10/7, her student evaluations tanked. And it wasn't, the student evaluations weren't about being a Zionist, but it was this collective sort of mob mentality to attack the professor in a way that it would hurt her the most. There is, and I feel like GW is a really good example for the last one because it's so public. But a professor at GW, who's an AEN member, was attacked for a theoretical economics paper that he published in an economics academic journal because it was taken by the current administration to be modeled for their vision of what could happen in Gaza. This professor is accused of being pro-genocide. He is, so he's maligned on social media, and our faculty at GW reach out to me. They tell me what's going on, and my boss, Dr. Miriam Elman, says to me, "This is great. He made it. His work was so impactful that he pissed people off." And I was like, "Yes, this should be our goal." I loved that attitude, and also the attitude of this professor until the next day, when whoever these students were decided to paper the walls of his office door, his office hallway, and the space where the economics faculty offices were, with flyers calling him pro-genocide. What I really appreciate about this professor is that I spoke to him the same night that the papering happened, and his response was, "They obviously didn't read the paper." It's, what did he say? It's a 50-page article with 25 pages of math equations. Nobody's reading that paper except for other economists. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we have very, very, very angry students and faculty that will find a lot of reasons to boycott, and it's very dangerous.
So I think that I want to come back to that point.
I think that's a good way to stop. It's
No, I think
very
it's-
dangerous.
I want to make sure to come back. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, I got excited. I think what you're talking about is sort of these different tactics, essentially, that are part of a broader strategy. And just reflecting on your story, Bianca, as an influencer, someone who, was targeted in this particular way, is what you shared. Many of you may have seen around here, we have many influencers who are here at Never Is Now today. It's not a mistake that Penn and Montana Tucker are our MCs, as Jonathan shared yesterday, right? And so I'm curious about, for you, Bianca, what have you seen happening also to other personalities and influencers and individuals like you in your line of work?
Well, first off, what I didn't mention previously is, I lost my representation after I was attacked by all the BDS trolls, and this was happening to a lot of people, not just me. And I freaked out because I've been doing the influencing and the TV hosting for 16 years, and I had always had representation. So I was really scared of trying to secure new work without that. You just look better when you have an agent or a manager, and no one would take a meeting with me. Like, no one. It's like as if they heard about me, like this terrible rumor, but it was really that they were just seeing my social page and seeing that I was Jewish. And even at this point, I was not that outspoken. I became more outspoken, and I'll transition into answering the question. When I started seeing a lot of my friends who were accidental activists. I know there's another panel about that, I think, happening right now. I started seeing some of my friends who were influencers becoming activists. A really good friend of mine, also a beauty influencer, you guys probably know her, Melissa Chapman. She's very outspoken. She was a beauty influencer like me, and so I was inspired because I saw them thriving from coming out and speaking and being proudly Zionist and sharing things about our Jewish tradition that none of us were sharing before. And going to Israel, I saw Michael Rappaport go to Israel, and then I remember I was on a chat for Jewish publicists and influencers, and someone said, we're sending the first 5 influencers from their organization to Israel, and I was like, me? And I went. I went twice within just a few months after the war, because I was dealing with so much pain and I think confusion from what was happening to me and from feeling like I was losing everything professionally, that I had nowhere else to put it but into activism. Like I really honestly had nothing going on. I had been at the peak of my career, and then all of a sudden it was like my career came to like a halt, so I wanted to do something. So I think there were a lot of influencers, tons like myself, who had the same experience, but a lot of us also suffered from coming out and speaking out, because all of the BDS people, they came back at us even harder. So it's beautiful to see the influencers and the media personalities that are thriving, because I think each one of us can say those are the people that keep us alive. They keep us they give us that moxie to keep going and inspire us when we feel like we've hit a wall from it or are emotionally exhausted. But at the same time, I just want you guys to know that a lot of influencers doing the activism, they get really burnt out, because we are taking beating from people. I am an influencer that shares a lot about my life, right after October 7th, I had a really devastating pregnancy loss, and I shared it. But that was used against me by the BDS trolls. So there was a lot of and this is my example of suffering, is that I was so empowered to speak out, and I never thought that that my miscarriage would then be just thrown at me in the most evil way, but it was. And people were telling me my baby deserved to die, just horrible things that, as a woman recovering from a miscarriage, which if anyone in this room has had one, it takes about a year to recover from that. And here I was having it thrown at me in my face. But I think in a way, not that I'm happy at all that those things happen simultaneously, but you know, Sarah and I were talking about it, and it's like when you just have nowhere to put your pain, you put it into, you know, your values and the things that you believe in most. And so that is what I love seeing that, you know, that's happening with influencers and media personalities is they're putting everything that, you know, they're feeling into making those videos, which by the way took a super long time to make. All those videos with all the facts and information, they take a long time to make, and I give so many of them credit for doing it, because there are times when I have to back down, because when I was in Israel and I saw, you know, the hostage families' grief, or I see people's grief here in the United States dealing with everything that we've had to witness and go through and still here, like, it brings back my own grief. So sometimes I have to take a step back from it and kind of like, you know, heal and then come back and be a strong voice again. So there are fluctuations in it. But it's been beautiful to see how many people have stepped up to the plate, especially those people that never before, you know, talked about Judaism, you know, at all on their platforms.
Yeah. I want to say thank you for sharing that. And it feels weird to ask another question. But I wanna follow that up actually, because I think, Sarah, you were talking about sort of the impact that we're seeing in the academic space. And Bianca, you shared in a very personal way, and also what others are feeling in sort of the influencer space. And Susan, you alluded to it in your opening comments. What have you seen for some of your members and also yourself as it relates to what you've been facing within the California Democratic Party? And I also want to point out ADL is a 501c3. We are a nonpartisan organization, but we felt like this was a really important example to include in this panel.
I mean, there's so many stories. I'll hit on 3 of them. There's something called the CADEM, which is the California Democratic Party discussion group, delegates group. And it's an unofficial group. It was formed by delegates, for delegates. It's not technically, quote unquote, the party's discussion group, but all of a sudden, everything in that Facebook group became about Israel-Palestine, everything. And the posting was all about demonizing Israel. And anyone who talked about, you know, actually, I support a Jewish and democratic state, and I support, you know, peace between Israelis and Palestinians, and that's what I really am very interested in working with other delegates on if we're going to be addressing this issue in the California Democratic Party. And the attacks were just innumerable. Zionist Nazi, white supremacist, baby killer. And in 2021, it really accelerated, if everyone remembers what happened in 2021, where there was
Missile
basically
war.
the Civil War. It just skyrocketed. And, you know, so that's one example. There's so much more to say about that, but another one is just on the very personal level. Someone that was running for a delegate in Los Angeles had actually attacked me and my partner, Matthew, saying that we were baby killers, Zionist shills, lots of expletives, and that he said, basically, your mother doesn't deserve to live for giving birth to a Zionist like you. And so we made sure that Slate knew about what this person had said, and he was not elected a delegate. Now, another, you know, that is, I'm talking about, there's the professional and the personal, but they are completely intertwined. But you have to take, we saw that we have to continue to take action. we're gonna be bullied, we're gonna be called out, and this, and it's gonna hurt a lot, we're gonna need a lot of friends, we're gonna need a lot of support around this, and it is very hard at times, very, very hard. Then, at the 2023 Democratic Party convention in Sacramento, the ceasefire resolution had never passed in the state party. People were pushing it. Now, when I say ceasefire, I don't mean a peaceful ceasefire that helps both sides. The ceasefire is simply about demonizing Israel. So they couldn't, the people that were supporting this, JDP, If Not Now, DSA, Council on American Islamic Relations, they came to the convention ready to enforce, to be sure that this is going to happen, that we're going to pass this ceasefire come hell or high water. And what they did was they actually broke into the convention. They shut it down for that evening. Shut it down completely. All meetings were canceled, but here's what happened. There were Jewish delegates that were together, and allies and friends that were together. And the doors were pushed open and crashed, and they were very scared that they were coming after them personally. And security actually had to hide them in a room at the convention until it blew over. So Jews hiding in the room, feeling threatened at a state party. And that was an unnerving experience, to say the least. And
Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna just, if there are any questions, you can pass them. Just we're gonna. I was right there with questions. If you have any, please pass them. We're gonna do one sort of rapid fire question for the three of you, and then we'll do questions from the audience. Thanks so much. So I think, as I mentioned at the onset, while these are three very different spaces, shall we say, in the world, the stories are starting to sound familiar, right? There's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of themes. And I asked the three of them, we decided to make it a question here, why did you say yes when we asked you to do this, right? These are incredibly personal stories, right? This is not sort of, yes, each of you bring an academic or sort of an understanding of the field in which you operate and live, and at the same time, I haven't asked you sort of broad questions, I've asked you pretty personal ones. And I'm curious why you said yes to that. So Sarah, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go Bianca. And these are like 2-minute answers, because we're gonna get to the Q&As.
He just time blocked me. Did you hear that?
Sorry.
He straight up was like, you talk to me.
Yeah, all three. I don't want to stop you.
All right, we decided, I was being very supportive of my co-panelists, and I said, all you gotta do is get up there and have chutzpah. And that's my answer, chutzpah. It's, I think chutzpah should be a Torah value, in case you're wondering what kind of Jew I am.
Holy chutzpah, they call it.
Chutzpah gets us really far in life. Having a spine of steel and a slightly bad attitude will get you even further. But I really do think that the most important thing that I can do is stand firmly in my beliefs and values and fight for them with everything I have. And when you're a Jew, that takes chutzpah. And I don't know how to do anything but be a Jewish academic, and that is a field rife with BDS and anti-Semitism and a lot of anti-Zionism. So here I am, standing firmly on my values and my beliefs with chutzpah and a slightly bad attitude.
I told you were three badass women. Bianca.
For me, I felt that I had no choice as a Honduran, as a Latina Jew, and I just remembered, growing up, because I didn't grow up with any anti-Semitism, I did remember many occasions where, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, by the way. I I remember many occasions when people would make fun of my mom, because my mom is a Honduran immigrant, and she has a very thick accent. And in Missouri, people would just, like, I don't know, it wasn't in a kind way. And my mom never stood up for herself. And I would get so mad, and I would get mad at my mom, because I would be like, Mom, why didn't you say something, you know? And then as I got older, I realized why she didn't, you know, because her generation was about assimilation and blending in. But for me, I thought about, especially since, you know, I'm trying to be a mother, TTC is what we call ourselves, TTC woman, trying to conceive woman. I thought about, you know, when I have my child, like, I don't want them to see someone making fun of me for wearing, you know, my Magen David and not say something. Like, I want future generations to know that we're not weak, that we will speak up, you know, that we're not going to let people just bulldoze over us. And so for me, I feel, you know, especially given, you know, my ethnic background, I feel I had no choice, and I used a lot of that emotion to get other Jewish, Latinos, South Americans involved in a piece that went very viral on one of Samantha Edis's, she has a page dedicated to all the voices supporting Jews, and we made a piece in Spanish, and it was Latino women of all color talking about, you know, not being quiet, and I felt very proud to do that, and my mother was a part of it, and it really was amazing for me to have my mom do that, because I felt like she kind of like vindicated herself to me for all the time she didn't stand up for herself, and so that's why I said yes.
If you cede the space to hate and extremism, it will win. You can't do that. And that is why I do this work. That is why so many friends and allies do this work, even during a very difficult time like this. But I'm going to tell you a quick story. So there's something called Progressive Delegates Network, and they are a group of people, mostly based coming from the Progressive Caucus in the California Democratic Party, but they're doing it not officially connected to the party. But they run slates of people who really want to make boycott of Israel the major thing in the party. And in 2021, they alluded to Israel being, you know, it was more of don't oppose boycotts, right? But in 2025, we just had an election. In 2025, it was all about the party has to be pro-Palestine. Their logo was a bear with a keffiyeh, wearing a keffiyeh. That was their logo. And it was all about basically defund Israel. It's a genocide apartheid state. So you look at the transition and the emboldening, and this was since October 7th, of course. But here's the thing. I ran as a delegate. I was elected. I just learned last night. I was elected. A whole slate in San Francisco was elected. Throughout, I haven't been able to look at the results statewide. I wanted to do that last night, but I couldn't. But in Northern California, Berkeley, Alameda County, the people that want to bring the party to its true values and not make it about hate and extremism, they prevailed.
So let me I want to apologize in advance. We have 13 questions, and I assure you we don't have time for 13 questions, but I have found at least two common themes from several of